Alright, what's up guys? This is the first part of an updated series of videos showing how to make a third-person game using Unity and some other apps. This is a project I'm doing in my Digital Media 2 class, so it's mostly geared for them. It's an updated version of a project I taught, honestly, last time of spring of 2019, or fall of 2019, and a lot of the apps and software like Unity that I've used back then have updated or are discontinued, so here's just a whole revamp. So I'm in Unity version 2020.2, that is the most recent long-term service. It may update, though I'm assuming the features that I'm using right now will work for at least a few years, though we'll see if I have to remake this again at some point. So let's go ahead and close this out, and I'm gonna go ahead and make a new project, and I'm gonna make sure that I know exactly where I am saving it. This is so important. So many apps like in Photoshop, you can just save your files later or rename your files later. For now, I'm gonna go ahead and name this third person tutorial. And then the location, I think the default location that Unity places it is in your home folder on a Mac. Choose where this is gonna go. So like this is for my Digital 2 course. I'll go ahead and put it in my Digital 2 folder. And then I will make a new folder for tutorial game. But you should choose where it's going. Name it something that you want to name it, your last name, third person game, maybe the date, right? This is currently April 2022. Name it something that you'll be able to find it. Don't just name it My Project 3, please. Oh my God. All right, so I'm gonna use a 3D core as a template. There are third person core scenes in more recent versions of Unity, but we're gonna start from the ground up here. So I'm gonna create a new project. While it's loading, I'm gonna head over to the asset store. And a package that I'm currently using for this is the starter assets. If you search for starter assets, one of the ones that Unity will come with by default is the third person character controller. This is fantastic. If you're using a third person core scene, this might already be in your project, but if you're just using a 3D core, you do need to import this into your project. So Unity loaded my blank project. I'm gonna go ahead and from the asset store, click open in Unity. If you've already downloaded it, you'd be able to access it from the package manager, but clicking open in Unity opens the package manager. So here it is, starter assets, third person character controller. If you need to download it. I already downloaded it, so I'm just gonna click import. This gives me a list of all the different assets, all the different files that this package comes with. I'm just gonna import them all, and it'll be in a little folder called starter assets. Loads for a second. And there we go. It took about a minute to import, but here it is in my project assets folder. I now have the starter assets from the third person controller and all the cool things I can play with that. One other thing that I do want to import into the scene is the terrain tools. Unity comes with some basic terrain tools, but there is a cool new package that gives us so much more to play with. In order to do that though, we need to turn on basically their beta version of packages. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to edit, project settings, and then inside of project settings, you're gonna find the package manager settings, and you do need to just check enable preview packages. Their preview packages are packages that are in the early stage of development, but the one that we're using, Terrain Tools, is fantastic. So once you've checked that box, you can then go to Window, Package Manager, if it's not already open, and then up here where you're looking at what assets or what packages you're looking at, these are all the ones that I've downloaded so far. Click on My Assets, then go to the Unity registry. And the one that we're looking for is called Terrain Tools. Terrain Tools. Again, it's a preview package. If you do not currently see it, you need to do that step that I just went over. So I'm gonna go ahead and install this. It's gonna take another minute or two. All right, now it's installed, but it comes with some sample assets that you do need to download from the asset store. So I'm just gonna click this button, download asset samples from asset store. It takes me to the asset store. Lo and behold, I've already done this, but if you just click open in Unity, just like we did with the last package, we're gonna import that. It'll give us the list of everything we wanna import. There it is. Let's just bring that all in. It's gonna come into a folder named samples. Sounds good. Click import and then wait the minute out for it to load. Okay, now we have everything in our scene and we're ready to go. So let's start by making a basic terrain. Now we're able to make one by clicking over here, but with the new terrain tools, if I go to Window, Terrain Toolbox, this window gives me a whole new set of terrain tools that I didn't have back in 2019. What I like to do is I like to drag this window just over here next to the inspector so I can click back and forth between them. And then if you don't have a terrain already, under create new terrain, you can set a number of how big, a number of properties here. I'm gonna leave it as it is just for this tutorial, and then down here I can click the create button And boom, I now have a very, very large terrain. Awesome, I'm gonna go back to my inspector, click on my terrain, F to find a center, and there I go. So let's go ahead and bring a character in, or give ourselves the ability to play. I am gonna go ahead and actually delete the main camera that the project came with, right click, delete. And then in our starter assets, I'm gonna go into the prefabs, or the third person controller, and then the prefabs that it came with. I'm gonna drag in three things. I'm gonna drag in their main camera, just straight to my hierarchy. I'm gonna drag in the player follow camera right underneath it there. And then I've got the player armature right here as a prefab that I can just drag and drop somewhere in this big old terrain. Now, it's in there, but what we need to do is we need to make sure that the player follow camera that I brought in, it has some settings over here. It is gonna follow, if I click this little circle here, we need to look for the player camera root. There we go. So now the main camera is attached to the player follow camera, which is following the player camera root, which is inside of the player armature. All you gotta do is hit play. And boom, look at this, we're playing a game. Isn't this cool? With the basic controller that it brings in for you, you can move with WASD or the arrow keys, space bars to jump, hold shift to sprint, use the mouse or the trackpad to look around. It's pretty basic. If I click on the player armature, there's a lot of things that I can customize and edit in here too, including the speed and the sprint speed, the jump height, all that stuff. I recommend just playing around with it and getting used to Unity's interface when it comes to this third person controller. I'm gonna exit play mode. For the second part of this tutorial, let's actually get around to talking about this terrain. This terrain is so boring right now, just the white and gray checkerboard. If I click on my terrain, in my inspector, I have a ton of different terrain tools that are real similar to how Unity used to work. If I click on the paint terrain brush, I have a whole drop-down menu here of different tools to use for this terrain. Most basically, raise lower terrain. All these brushes that I see here came in with that assets pack that we downloaded earlier. I love these ones that kind of look like veins or like tree branches, because if you use them, it kind of looks like mountain passes. You see how I'm raising it? So again, left click to raise terrain, hold control and left click to lower the terrain. So control on my keyboard and click, boom, is lowering the terrain. Some other hotkeys there. A on the keyboard, if you press and hold A, you can increase or decrease the strength of your brush. If you press and hold S on the keyboard, you can increase or decrease the size of your brush. And then D rotates the brush. So it's all like right there on the keyboard, ASD, right? And I can just start playing with that. Rotate the brush a little bit, probably drop the strength a little bit. And this is an easy way to just start building terrain and play with it. I recommend playing with different brushes and have fun with it. Also in this menu here, you have things like set height. Set height, if I press and hold, I believe it's the control key on the keyboard and left click, that kind of gives a target height, and then I can just click around and it paints everything to that height. Easy way to create different plateaus. You also have the smooth height button right here, so if you have these jagged peaks and you kind of want to dull them a little bit, boom, now they're less intense. So now let's talk texture. This gray and white checkerboard box is pretty boring. That sample pack that we downloaded with the terrain tools earlier has a bunch of terrain textures in it. You can download your own from the internet or from the asset store. Let's just use the ones that it came with for now. If I change this to paint texture, now if I click, it doesn't do anything. Because what we need to do is we need to add layers of texture. Imagine them to be like swatches of paint or our color palette, right? With paint texture selected, I can scroll down and I have my layers here. If I click on that layers, I see that I currently have an empty layer palette. If I click add new layer, Unity will by default grab all of the texture files it sees in my project. So these are the ones that sample pack came with. I'm gonna go ahead and click on the rock one, and boom, it paints the entire thing to be rock, right? Now this is a little intense at first. If you click on your layer that you just created, you have the layer properties right down here, and we can change a few things. The normal scale is how much it creates like height off of the visualization. If that's too much right there, I can change that to 1. Oh, maybe I kind of liked it before, so maybe let's see what 2 looks like. That looks nice. The tile settings, because a terrain tile is just one seamless square, right? Right now it's 100 by 100. That looks pretty big. Let's see what 10 by 10 looks like. 10 by 10. All right, that might be a little too small. Now it's a little too obvious, so let's split that 50 to 50. Looks pretty good, but you can decide what works best for you. So the entire thing being plain rock looks boring. Let's add another layer. If I click here, add another layer. Let's say, hey, we add the moss layer. Click on that. And then now I can switch back and forth between these two. If I select my moss layer and grab a brush, I can then paint the moss on there. That moss also looks like it needs to be a little bit edited. Let's change that to 50 by 50 tile size as well. And there we go. Now I'm really playing here. Add the snow layer, paint the tops of mountain caps with snow, you know, because that's just like how it goes. Play with this, right? These are all the basics of what we're doing here. All right, I think that's the basics of what I want to cover in this video, right? Creating a new scene, downloading those sample assets, giving you the tools to sculpt and build your terrain, bringing in that third-person controller. If I hit that playtest button, I already think this is looking pretty cool. All right, next tutorial, let's go over some more stuff, decorating our scene, bringing in things like trees, as well as other assets from the asset store, websites like TurboSquid and Blender. Thanks for watching.